What we're going to talk about today is closing argument, and why I start with closing first is the main key. I flip my class around, and we flip some of our programs and cover closing first. And one of the reasons why we cover closing first is I like to think about it analytically as how you build a case. My training, and I was a prosecutor, so I'm always worried about my elements, my burden of proof, and how I'm going to put together a case. Well, I do it, and you've probably heard this from more seasoned trial attorneys, you do it by looking at and thinking about your closing first. So I'll get questions from students throughout the course of a semester when they're working on an individual exercise or they're working on a finite exercise, and they'll start to think, I have a cross-examination for Mr. Peterson tomorrow. What questions should I ask in cross-examination? And I'll flip it and go to this, why I start by looking at cross-examination, or why I start by looking at closing argument. What do you want to say about that witness and your examination if it works out exactly as you planned when you're fast forward to closing? If you're in closing and you're standing up, you should have your organized argument kind of ready and planned out and thought about it. It's not going to come out like that. You're not going to say what you planned in the beginning, but you should start to look at if everything goes exactly as planned and I get to stand before the jury at the end of the case, what do I want to be able to say? What do I want to be able to say about the law and the elements? What do I want to say about what my witnesses said and contribute to the case? What do I want to say about the exhibits that I fought hard to get into evidence and how they contribute to the case? And what do I want to say about the other side? What do I want to say about what the other side wasn't able to do, or why my theory wins out, or why what I think about the case is probably the most important way that you should look at the case. We're going to talk about a few specific things but I want you to look at why closing first, because this is going to dictate what we do in the rest of our course. This is going to dictate everything we do in trial advocacy. It doesn't matter if you have a partner and the partner is the one delivering the closing. You two, as a team, should sit back, look at your case, and say, where do we want to be at the end? What do we want to be saying? If we understand the law, and we understand the facts, and we understand a couple of different versions of the facts that can come out through trial, where do we want to be at the end? What is a good outcome for us? What do I want to be saying at the end? I want to look at my closing first. So that's why we flip the class around and do closing first in class. I want you to start envisioning closing as a product of trial. Okay? Closing is not just there's a speech at the beginning and there's a speech at the end, and the one at the end we call closings because it's over after that. That's not what it's about. Closing is a product of trial. Closing is a reflection of all the stuff you did during trial. This is the time when you get to stand up at the end and you get to remind them about what happened and explain to them what happened in an organized way. So let's think about it like this. At some point, I'm going to organize some witnesses as part of my case. And don't start thinking about my case. It's not just plaintiffs and it's not just prosecution who has the burden, who thinks this way. You have a case theory if you're on the defense side. Your case theory could be they don't meet the elements. Your case theory could be this was self-defense. Your case theory could be contributory negligence. Right? This works either side, whether you have the burden or you do not. But either way, we're going to have some witnesses. And I can plan out ahead of time, I'm going to call Mr. Jones. And I'm going to call Mr. Jones in my case in chief, putting together what I want to put on as a case. And I think to myself, what do I want to say about Mr. Jones' testimony that I know going in is going to be part of my case? What do I want to say in closing about what he contributes? Under what elements does his testimony fall? To what exhibits does Mr. Jones relate to where I can put that all together in closing? Same thing with exhibits, right? I might be able to say, hey, Exhibit 7 was this. Exhibit 7 was the contract. Exhibit 7 was the lease. Exhibit 7 was the photograph. I can say what it is and how that helps me explain the case and my version of the case in closing. It can also be, think about it, when exhibits are into evidence, it's the information contained in those exhibits. So it could be Exhibit 14. In there it says, I release all liability from this under this contract. Well, those words within that exhibit is going to be something I'm going to pull out and I'm going to highlight and I'm going to organize in a specific way. So exhibits are an important part of the product that's going to become part of my closing. How do I know which exhibits to pull forward? I can tell you that in life, it doesn't happen like it's a mock trial problem or a problem that you'll see in trial ad. There isn't a neat little package of 3 exhibits that are in the back that are your exhibits for the exercise. No, instead, there's a truckload, a boatload, boxes full of exhibits. It's for you to cull out what's going to be important for you to tell your story and your version of the case, right? It doesn't separate itself. So how do you decide which exhibits are going to be important? How do you decide which exhibits you don't have that you need to go get? Right? Photographs are the greatest example of that. If you have a case with a scene, if you have a case where something happened, right? A picture is worth 1,000 words. Go out and take them now. Go out and take them today. And have a bunch of photographs that then speak to what happened at different themes. You'll color it, and you'll editorialize those pictures with the testimony throughout the trial. Think of your witnesses, think of exhibits. Lastly, the other side's going to put on a case. One of the things that emphasizes the importance of closing and emphasizes why we need a closing at the end is because it's not a neat presentation of just your stuff. It's not grand jury where I as a prosecutor get to show up and no one else gets to show up and I get to say, my case is about this, the elements are about that, there is no other version, thank you very much for coming, right? It doesn't work like that at trial. It's a mess. I get to put on a little bit of my stuff, they get to put on a little bit of their stuff, and back and forth throughout the whole trial. It's dizzying for jurors. Jurors don't do this every day like we do as lawyers. They certainly are not accustomed to receiving information the way the trial handles it, the way a trial gives it. So what happens is, you too have to organize what you're going to do with their witnesses and the questions that you ask in cross-examination. I guarantee some of you in trial advocacy, and some of you that when you were in trial advocacy, asked the question, what questions should I ask this witness on cross-examination? I know I should probably ask him this thing about the prior conviction, but what else about the facts? What do you want to say about this witness in closing? What do you envision that ideal paragraph about the other side's witness, Mrs. Smith? What do you envision that other side's witness is going to contribute, and what do you want to say? If it's something that flies in the face of your theory and your version of the case, maybe you just want to say you shouldn't believe anything this person says. Mrs. Smith's a liar. Maybe if there's things that help your case, you want to say even their witnesses are in line with the way you should look at this case. Remember Mrs. Smith? They called Mrs. Smith, but Mrs. Smith added this to my theory, my version of the facts. But the way I want you to start looking at this, your witnesses, your exhibits, other sides, questions that you can get from other witnesses, they all start to contribute to what you want to say in closing, right? And it all lines up. There's an ideal paragraph out there that falls under an organizational element, right? Maybe I organize it by elements of the case. Maybe I organize it by a chronology of events. Maybe I organize it in some limited circumstances by how the trial came out, witness 1, witness 2, things like that. But I have an argument, a bullet,